And so I just remember that like that feeling of anger and embarrassment and just kind of wanting to crawl up into a ball because that was me. I was a white girl. So today we're going to talk about what it means to be white. And this is going to be a series that I'm going to continue because I think that there's a large need for it. And it's one of the biggest things my brand is founded on is accountability for white folks, including myself. I am not exempt from any of these things. I am also attempting to always do the work and I'm always trying. And my goal with this is to create a community of white folks that are all trying. Because we got to do better, white people. We just got to. The first topic I kind of want to talk about, and there's no specific order, and one of the crazy things to me about learning about being white means that it's an ongoing journey. It never ends. And for me, been on this journey for probably about 10 years, really learning about my privilege of being white and really understanding that I will never stop rediscovering what my memories mean, the actions that I have taken that have harmed folks of color, and the work that I need to continue to do. Those are all a part of it. And so I'm going to record this video and talk about a couple memories and experiences. However, I'm totally aware that in maybe a couple years, I'll look back and say that that wasn't actually what was at play there, right? Because part of being privileged is that we have a different narrative than other people do. We have as white folks and as people of privileged identities, we have a different narrative compared to all the other identity groups that are also living in this world. So like for example, as like a queer person, which is an oppressed identity, right? I look at straight people's actions as different than probably most straight people look at their actions. The same way that like as a white person, I look at the way that I behave or act and I look at it differently than the way that people of color do. And so the goal is that we start to actually learn what our actions are and how they affect others. Because one of the biggest things for white folks is that we have the privilege to be an individual. We are not lumped in with other white folks. We get to be whoever we want to be and look at it as individual choices and individual behaviors and not be associated with a large group about it. Understanding that like we have to start to look at our fellow white people as part of our community, as part of our world, and as part of who represents us. We're not doing great. For this session, I want to talk about the first couple times I was defined by my race. Now, if you ask any person of color, this has been something that people of color deal with on daily, hourly, minutely. People of color learn about very early in their lives that they are part of a larger group and that their entire race is put into one category. White people have the privilege not to be. Therefore, if you are a white person listening to this, take a moment to think about when was the first time that you were ever defined by your race. And if you don't have a memory, ask yourself why. For me, my first memory of being called white was by my teammates in high school. I played high school basketball. Probably about half the people on the team were white, half the people were people of color, but within the starters, it was mostly people of color and myself. As I'm sure anyone who's ever played high school sports or any sort of sports, I guess, you have like the starters that hang out and then the rest of the team, right? That hang out with the people of color quite a bit, whether it's on like trips or in the hallway, that kind of thing. And I remember the first time I got called white for something. And I remember like immediately getting defensive, getting kind of like hot and sweaty, but just knowing that I couldn't refer to them as black. Like I just knew that that was something that I couldn't do, but not understanding like why it was that just didn't really feel good or like why I couldn't refer to them as black. It was just something that I just knew. I think that's the first memory that I have of getting called white. It was something that I did, a behavior that I'm sure was really white. So that's kind of my first memory. And then the memory kind of blacks out. Like I don't remember after that. My mission is to build a community of triers that are attempting to live our most accountable and authentic selves. The big moment where I felt like I was truly being defined by my race. I was studying abroad in Trinidad and Tobago. I was about 20, 21 years old. I was in Port of Spain, which is the capital, walking down the street with a couple other white people, because white people always hang out with white people, even when there's few of us. I remember someone saying, white girl. Being a woman, being femme, all that, like, we always get catcalled, right? That's just kind of the reality. And I could go into that, but we're focusing on race right now. And I remember like hearing that from behind me, just immediately turning like bright red, starting to walk a little faster. Whenever I've gotten catcalled in the US before this, it was always like, oh, I'll act like it's not happening. I'll ignore it. And I could justify it by being like, well, maybe they're not talking to me. But here I am, the only white girl for miles. It couldn't not be me. And so I just remember that, like, that feeling of anger and embarrassment and just kind of wanting to crawl up into a ball, because that was me. I was a white girl, and no one had ever totally just called me out for being a white girl. Yeah, I remember just this like gross feeling, and it definitely not being comfortable or enjoyable. This was a big moment because it was the first time that I'd really been called a white girl in a setting where I just kind of had to sit in it. I was on the street. That person could still see me, kept calling, all that. And I just had to kind of keep walking away. I remember that still to this day. I can still remember kind of the feelings that came with it. It usually brings me back. I remember what I was wearing. I remember the stalls next to me. And that was a big moment. And I didn't understand in that moment that was a big moment. When I studied abroad in Trinidad and Tobago, it was a continuous realization of both being white and what that means to be white. And so this was one of those big moments where I was being 100%, well, 50%, I was being defined by being white and being a woman. That was the first time I had ever truly felt like I was being defined by my race. Take some time. Think about, like, when was the first time that you were defined for being white? And how old were you? What did that feel like? Did you know what that felt like at the moment? Like, did you know that was the feeling happening? What did that mean? Could you process it in the moment? Did you process it years later like I did? Yeah, and what were your thoughts around that? I'd love to hear other people's experience, because I know that when I really started to dive into doing work around what it means to be white, I had a moment of understanding my whiteness earlier than most, but not as early as some. I'd love to hear, like, how old were you? What were the feelings that came with it? What happened after? What have you done since that moment? Has it just been something you block out and, like, I don't really think about it, and now I'm helping bring it up in you? Or was it something that was it a defining moment like it was for me?